In this module, we'll be sharing some information about the ECTA DaSy System Framework Self-Assessment. Specifically, we'll be providing an overview of the self-assessment. We'll be talking briefly about some guidance on how to use the self-assessment, and we'll actually be demonstrating what the self-assessment looks like and how to use it. Just in the way of a reminder, the ECTA framework is organized around 6 interrelated components. You can see them. They are governance, finance, personnel, workforce, accountability and quality improvement, quality standards, and data system. The DaSy data system is further broken down into 5 subcomponents: purpose and vision, data governance and management, stakeholder engagement, system design and development, and sustainability. Within the framework, there are quality indicators which identify what needs to be in place in order to support a high-quality system, and then elements of quality which explain the how, that is, how to operationalize the implementation of those quality indicators. The purpose of the self-assessment is to provide you a way to gather evidence and to use numbers to indicate where you are in terms of your Part C or Part B 619 system. Obviously, it serves as a companion to the ECTA and DaSy framework, with the point being to provide a structure to evaluate and to identify both areas of strengths that states can build on, as well as areas that need improvement. Again, I mentioned that it's a companion to the ECTA and data system frameworks. It provides you a current status or snapshot on where your system is, and it allows you a means by which to identify potential areas of improvement. I want to emphasize that the self-assessment has an emphasis on self. That is, that this is a process that is done by state staff in collaboration with stakeholders. DaSy or ECTA staff are certainly available to provide technical assistance and guidance and even to facilitate this process, but this is a process overall that is done by the state itself. The self-assessment has a shared structure between both ECTA and the DaSy system framework, and that shared structure, again, consists of the same scale for rating the elements of quality on a 1 to 4 scale, and the same scale for scoring the quality indicators, 1 to 4. And the tool is built in Excel. The element rating scale goes from 1 to 4 with 2 items, element rating 1 and 2, as no, the element is not in place. The difference being that 1, it's not in place and you're not planning to work on it anytime soon. And then 2, it's not in place, but you're planning to work on it and or getting started on it. Rating points of 3 and 4 are yes, there is some implementation of the element. 3 means that the element has been partially implemented, and 4 means the element has been fully implemented. The partial implementation of an element can play out in different ways. It could be that some part, but not all of the element has been implemented, or the element might be implemented in some portions of your state, but not statewide across the entire state. So there are different ways that you can see partial implementation. The element rating is actually done by the state team. They gather evidence and they come up with a rating for each element on this 1 to 4 scale. Those element ratings then drive what your quality indicator rating is, and this rating scale denotes those quality indicators, as I mentioned, on a scale from 1 to 7. Once you rate your elements of quality, the quality indicator rating is automatically calculated. The scale runs from 1, which means none of the elements is yet planned or in place. That is, they are all 1s. All have element ratings of 1, to 7, all elements are fully implemented. In other words, all elements have an element rating of 4. And you can see the midpoints of the scale there. 4 means that half of the elements are in place, a few may be fully implemented. 5, half of the elements are in place, and some are fully implemented. 6, half of the elements are fully implemented, the rest are partially implemented, and up to 7, and so on and so forth. So the quality indicator denotes varying levels of implementation. I want to point out a very important resource that you should take a look at before completing the self-assessment, and it's what we call our guidance document. The guidance document is available online. You can download it and you can print it, and it consists of 2 parts. The first part presents suggestions for our recommended process on how to actually go about completing the self-assessment. Steps include identifying and involving stakeholders, having discussions during which you gather and document the elements, and then you rate each element. You can also review the results and determine priorities for improvement planning, and then actually proceed with action planning for system improvement. So there are suggestions for not just the recommended process, but the second part of that guidance document is actually detailed instructions on how to use the self-assessment tool itself. So, how do you get to the tool? You can download the tool from either the ECTA website or from the DaSy Center website at these links provided here. And along with the tool and your ability to download that tool, you'll actually see right next to it the guidance document, and again, you can download that from this same place. So we're going to go and take a look at the self-assessment tool. As I mentioned, it is an Excel document, and once you download it, the hardest thing that you'll have to do is actually enable what we call macros. Macros are just ways of automating and simplifying, making a little bit more efficient some routines within the workbook itself. And so for most of you with later versions of Excel, once you download the Excel tool and open it up, the way that you'll enable those macros is simply to click on this button that says Enable Content, and that's it. Your macros are now enabled. For those of you with earlier versions of Excel, 2007 and 2010, you may have to enable the macros in slightly different ways. Some of that also depends on your security settings. So in this first worksheet under the Instructions tab, you'll see links here for really easy to follow instructions on how to enable those macros if you have versions of Excel. The self-assessment tool has 16 different worksheets within it. Each of those worksheets is identified by a tab at the bottom, and each of those worksheets is labeled. You can see that the first worksheet are the detailed instructions. Note that this is just the second part of that guidance document. So the instructions are in both the guidance document as well as the first sheet within this workbook. There is a tab for you to identify the participants who have been involved in the self-assessment. There's a table of contents of all of the components and subcomponents. These next 11 sheets, going from GV to SU, are actually what we call the element rating sheets. And there's a sheet per each component of the ECTA framework, from governance, finance, personnel, etc., down to quality standards. And then there are 6 sheets, all color-coded in some shade of blue, that go into the data system framework or self-assessment. So those are your 11 element rating sheets. There is then a special sheet called comprehensive data or comp data that we'll explain a little bit later. And then the QI summary is a way for you to have a graphic representation of all of your QI ratings across all of the components that you've chosen to complete. So, I mentioned the instructions. I want to talk a little bit about the participant tab. As I mentioned, this is a way for you to document who has been involved in the self-assessment by name as well as what their role is. It allows you to identify their participation by component and subcomponent. So if different people have been involved in different components, you can indicate by a check those who are involved in governance, for example, versus accountability and quality improvement. And then likewise, you can indicate the date so that if you've completed 2 or more components or subcomponents on different dates, you can document the date on which each of those were done. Up above, there's also a place for you to identify your state and then for you to identify whether you are a Part C or a Part B 619 program. That information is important because it will come into play in affecting the scoring for the comp data, which I'll explain a little bit later. And then let's go and look at the table of contents. The table of contents, as I mentioned, provides the breakdown of each of the ECTA components and their subcomponents, and then provides each of the data system subcomponents with there being a sheet for each one of those. You can use the table of contents to navigate. For example, if you wanted to go to the finance worksheet, you can click on that link and it takes you there, or you can just click on the tabs below and they'll take you there as well. But the table of contents shows you that breakdown of each of the components and the subcomponents. So here's one of the element rating sheets. And before we get started in addressing the content in this sheet, I want to provide you some basic information on the lay of the land in terms of general formatting. Whenever you see a cell that is light orange or light yellow in shading, that's a cell that in which you can enter data. Okay? You can enter data in here by typing in a cell and entering text information. When you're doing the ratings, you can enter the number. Again, this number goes from 1 to 4, and you can either enter the number. There's also a drop-down menu here with those numbers. It's a lot easier to just enter the number rather than use the drop-down. And then the priority, again, there's a drop-down that tells you whether it's low, medium, and high priority, or you can just simply enter L, M, or H, and it doesn't matter if that's uppercase or lowercase. This workbook and the information that you enter in it is pretty well controlled. You're not going to be able to enter information in a cell that doesn't require information. It's virtually impossible to break, to delete, or to lose a formula, for example. Those cells that need to be protected are protected, and those cells that need to have data entered into them allow you to do that. Likewise, there are edit checks on the cells, so you can't enter variables or values that are out of range. For example, you cannot enter a 5 in this cell. You can only enter, it only goes from 1 to 4. So that's the lay of the land in terms of general formatting. I want to now take a little bit of time and explain to you how each of the element rating sheets works. This is the rating sheet for governance, one of the ECTA framework. You use this to rate the elements. The elements, as you can imagine, are organized in terms of quality indicators. So here's quality indicator 1 in governance, and it has elements A through I. And then there's quality indicator 2, and so on and so forth. When you're completing the self-assessment, you look at the element, make sure you understand what it means. You then go about gathering the evidence that you have in terms of whether that element is implemented, whether it's partially implemented or fully implemented. You gather the evidence, you document that here in this text box, and then your team goes about establishing a rating from 1 to 4. Notice that there are boxes up here that allow you to, right now we are in a view that allows you to show the evidence so that you can see the evidence for each of those elements of quality. If for some reason you didn't want to look at that, you can hide the evidence, and you hide it, and you can just toggle back and forth here. So you have 2 different views of each element sheet with and without the evidence. And likewise, if you wanted to print this, and this is the main reason for the hide the evidence, if you wanted to print just the rating sheet without the evidence being printed, you can print it with or without the evidence available to you. Once all of the elements in a QI have been rated, the QI rating pops up. And again, you'll note here that this is a blue shaded field, which means that you cannot enter that information. That information is automatically calculated for you. So you can't enter anything in those cells where it says QI rating. That is auto-calculated. In order for that automatic calculation to work, each of the elements has to be rated. So I'm going to go down here and show you an example. Here we have QI 8, and we have rated element A, B through E. We have not rated element F, and therefore that QI rating does not show up. Once we enter an element there, an element rating, and we put a 3 in there, for example, then the quality rating shows up. So again, all of the elements have to be rated in order for the quality rating to be displayed. We've also built into each of these element rating sheets your ability to do some preliminary steps for improvement planning, and that takes the form of identifying whether each element is low, medium, or high priority in terms of your improvement planning activities, and you can go through and rate those. These are purely optional, and you can use the drop-down, or likewise you can just type in an M here, again, upper or lowercase, and it will be displayed there. You can do those priority ratings at either the element level and or at the QI rating. So I'll type in an H there, and it signifies to us that that QI1 has a high priority for us in terms of improvement planning. Again, if you follow our recommended process in the guidance document, our recommendation is for you to first go through, gather and document the evidence, rate each element of quality. You'll get your quality indicator ratings. Then, based on all of that information, you can go back through and do your priority ratings. You can do them at the same time you're doing your element ratings, but our recommended process is to do the entire component first and then go back and do your priority ratings. So you'll do that for each and every component that you want to address, or for the DaSy subcomponents. Once you rate all of your elements of quality, you can then go over to what we call our QI summary sheet. And this QI summary sheet displays a summary for the QI ratings for each of the quality indicators for which all of the elements were rated. No information can be entered on this sheet. It is all automatically pulled over from all of the element rating sheets that you've completed prior to coming to this sheet. So this is a read-only sheet. it reflects the information that you've already entered in those element rating sheets. This sheet provides you a profile of all of the QIs in each of the components that you've completed, i.e. that you've rated. And let me go through and show you what's available in this QI summary. So in our first component, governance, it has 8 quality indicators. Here we're shown the QI rating for each of those, again on a 7-point scale. And if we've bothered to enter a priority for any of those QIs, it displays here. Likewise, we have a graphical representation of each of those QI ratings. So any ratings that are a 1 or a 2 are displayed in red. Any QI ratings of 3 or 4 are displayed in yellow, and ratings of 6 or 7 are displayed in green. So it's kind of a dashboard type view of your QI ratings for each of your components. So you'll see the rating here, and then you'll see the graphic representation here. To the right of those horizontal bars, you're given the total number of elements in each of the QIs. So we see here QI1 has 9 elements, QI2 has 8 elements, and so on and so forth. To the right of that, you're provided with the breakdown of your element ratings, so that for QI1, for example, there are 9 elements, and each of those 9 elements received an element rating of 1. QI2, 8 elements, each of those received an element rating of 4. QI3 has 5 elements, 3 elements were rated 3, 2 elements were rated 4. Notice that when you sum the numbers in these 4 element rating boxes, you'll always come to the total number of elements. So in order for there to be a QI rating again, all of the elements have to be rated, and that has to correspond to, obviously, to the total number of elements. To the right of your element ratings is a summary of the elements with each priority that you've designated, low, medium, and high. Again, I only designated 1 quality indicator, 1 element in this quality indicator as a medium, and so it shows up here. I'll go down to another one. Never mind, skip that. I haven't done that. So that's how this QI summary sheet works. I want to show you another example in here in terms of the views that you have available to you. If for some reason you want to print this sheet and you don't need to see all of the QI text or narrative description displayed there, you can use this button up here that says narrow the rows, and you'll just see 1 line per each quality indicator. But if you want to see the full, complete narrative description of each QI, you go back up here and do wrap text, and then you see the entire quality indicator display. So those are some options to you in terms of what you can view and what you can display. These links up here also take you to various things. You can either scroll down to get to other components or the data subcomponents, or you can just use the hyperlink there, and it takes you down into the system design and development subcomponent. So that Amy and other folks from CTE, I realized that when I did this, I really didn't have many examples of the priority ratings in here. So when we do this for real, we might want to have a couple of quality indicators where more of the elements are given a priority, so folks can see those displayed here, and to recognize that the sum of these the numbers in these three boxes doesn't have to equal the total number of elements, because they don't have to go through and give each and every element or each and every QI, for example, some priority designation. Okay. Now I'm going to continue on with explaining the comp data sheet. The comp data sheet is a special part of Quality Indicator 4 of the Data System Design and Development subcomponent. In working with our partner states who helped us develop the framework, we identified a number of data elements that we thought should be available in a high-quality Part C or Part B Section 619 data system. Those data elements are organized on this sheet by three types. There are child-level data elements, there are service provider or teacher-level data elements, and then there are early intervention services program or local education agency level data elements. So if you want to go through and complete this for your state data system, you can identify whether your data system has each of these elements in it by indicating a yes or a no. And when you've gone through and identified each of those data elements, you'll get a summary up here telling you the number of data elements out of all of the child level data elements, all of the service provider and teacher level data elements, and all of the local program or LEA data elements. You'll get the total number that you have out of the total possible. That will give you a percentage, and then you'll also get the total across all of those three types of data elements. Remember when we were in the participants' data, in the participant sheet, I explained that it was important for you to identify whether you were a Part B 619 or a Part C program. And the reason that's important is that in working with our partner states, there were 4 data elements that Section 619 staff didn't think were particularly applicable or necessary for a 619 data system. So those are denoted here, and if you scroll down here, you'll see those denoted via a separate coding. It basically, if you are a Part B 619 program, you do not have to enter this. Again, you're entering data in a cell that's yellow or orange coded. That blue shading suggests you don't enter it because the element is not applicable to your Part B 619 program. So there's 1 element, 2 elements in child level, and then there are 2 elements in the provider or teacher level data elements. If we go back and change that and say that our program is 619, then we come back into the comp data sheet, and you'll see here that you should then indicate whether that's a yes or a no for all of those 4 data elements that were deemed not applicable for 619. So that's one set of special scoring instructions. And those are simply, that's the only place really, that's one of 2 places where you'll see what's equivalent to not applicable, and that's only not applicable for those 4 data elements for 619 programs. I want to explain 2 other sets of special scoring conditions. One of those is with the quality standards component in the ECTA framework. And again, whenever there's special scoring instructions, there's some type of text that explains that. And here for Quality Indicator 1 of the Quality Standards component, you'll notice that if elements H and I are not in place, that if these are scored a 1 or a 2, and if K is also scored a 1 or a 2, then these additional elements, L through N, come into play. and you should go ahead and rate those. However, you'll notice that for H, I, and K, the element is in place. That is, it has a rating of a 3 or a 4, and so the tool kind of automatically strikes through these elements and says, don't worry about those, you don't have to rate those. And let's go ahead and look at what would have happened, though, if these had received a rating or a 1 or a 2. Now, because these elements are not in place, that is, they're scored a 1 or 2, we're telling you that you should go ahead and rate elements L, M, and N, and once you do that, your quality indicator, you'll receive a quality indicator. But again, that quality indicator isn't displayed because not all of the applicable elements have been rated. So that's the second special scoring condition. And then one more minor scoring condition, and that is that in the system design and development subcomponent of the data system component, on quality indicator number 4, first of all, you'll notice here that for quality indicator 4, element A is entirely the set of data elements in the comp data sheet. But there are additional elements B through P, or B through Q, that describe some of the features and functions that we think go into making up a high-quality data system. So the comp data, or element A, does not go into rating QI4, but elements B through Q do. Within these elements, there are 2, element H and element P, and again, you'll notice special scoring by a slightly different shading within the context. And for elements H and P, are only applicable to states that have what we call a transactional data system. So if you have a transactional data system, you should rate this element. If you don't have a transactional data system, you have not applicable available to you as a way to tell us and to tell you, not to tell us, but to tell you that that item is not applicable because you don't have a transactional data system. And the same thing with element P. So be sure to rate those as not applicable if that is the case, and then the scoring will take those into account. So those were your 3 special scoring conditions: the quality standards, the comp data, where there are 4 data elements that do not pertain to 619, and then for these 2 elements in quality indicator 4 in the system design and development subcomponent. Finally, in wrapping up, I want to say a few words about saving the file, and that is that the self-assessment is an Excel file, and it operates like any other Excel file. It needs to be saved just like any other file. In the guidance, we suggest that you use the date in the file name once you complete at least one component. And then if you go back and complete another component or 2 or more components, always save that same file with a new date, so it'll be current. And again, remember to go into the Participants tab, and if you've rated 2 or more components over an extended period of time, be sure to document the date on which you did those, just so you can recall that if you need to. And finally, a word about printing. Each worksheet has an existing default print area that's set up that kind of optimizes your printing. And of course, we showed you how you can print either with different views, with some of the narrative displayed, or with kind of condensing that and making that more efficient. But despite that existing default print area setup, you can always go through and redefine or resize by using the print area set up in the page layout. So in any Excel sheet, you can always go through and change the print area by selecting certain areas that you want to print and things like that. So that is available. Hey, Amy and CTE staff, just one thing I forgot to cover, and that is in the element rating sheets. I forgot to mention that the name of each component or subcomponent is always printed in the upper left-hand portion of that sheet. I forgot to reference that the scales are here, that the element of rating scale is used to rate each of these elements, and that the QI rating scale is identified over here just for their convenience. And also forgot to mention that there are ways to navigate within this sheet so that if they're at the top at QI1 and they want to go down to QI4, that those hyperlink buttons just take them directly to whatever QI they want to go to. So I think that's all of the content I forgot to mention. It was a little clunky and not as smooth as I would have liked, but I'm sure you'll make it perfect. Okay, thanks.